Can God change your life in just 30 minutes? I believe you're watching right now because God has something special for you. I'm Jonathan Bernis, and I'm a Jewish rabbi who follows Jesus. Join me for Jewish Voice, and you'll discover how Bible prophecy is coming to pass before our very eyes and why you need to stand with Israel. You can play a role in God's end-time plan. Find out how on Jewish Voice. Well, shalom and welcome to Jewish Voice, where we help you to understand the Jewish roots of your Christian faith, Bible prophecy, and why you need to stand with Israel. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Bernis. Thanks for joining us. My guest today is here to share about an extraordinary book that he's created that's filled with historic photos and the rich history of God's land. Incredible images spanning 100 years. Please welcome Doug Hershey. Doug, welcome. I think this is one of the most interesting and exciting books about Israel that I've ever seen. And I really want to convey this to you. This is extraordinary. So I want to tell people what this is about specifically in just a minute. I want to first hear how you got the idea for this, because it's an incredible concept.
I've been back and forth to the land of Israel for about 20 years, and most recently in the last 10 on a more regular basis. And for me, one of my favorite drives throughout the land is going from the Galilee region down the Jordan Valley to Jericho. And for my first few trips that I've been there 20 some years ago, it was dry and desolate. And in the last 5 to 10 years, every time that I'm there, driving down the valley, more and more things began changing. More and more vineyards and date farms and orchards, and just life began really blooming. And as I was reading the scriptures, just realizing, some of what was prophesied in the Bible about the land reviving was beginning to happen. And I was seeing the land change on its own.
Yeah, the first time I went was in college. I worked on an archaeological dig back in 1983. And highways today that are multi-lane superhighways were just roads, some of them paved, some of them not paved, narrow roads. Help us understand why Israel is so different from any other country, because every country has improved their land. Every country has developed technology. Israel is different. Why?
Israel is unique in the scope of human history. There's been no other people group that has been on a particular piece of land to then be forcibly removed for 70 years, to return to the same piece of land for a few hundred years, and then again be forcibly removed and scattered through the ends of the earth for over 2,000 years, to then come back to the exact same piece of real estate as an identifiable and a recognizable people. It's an anomaly in human history. It's never happened before. I mean, even speaking the same language as their ancestors that were thrown off before. And so with what's happening and what we're seeing in the state of Israel in the last 70 years is really just a fulfillment of a lot of the things that are in the Bible. And so there's been no other people group that has had its history foretold 2,600 years ago by any ancient writer, nothing.
Yeah, let's hang on this one, because this one really proves not only the existence of God, but the truth of God's word. That 2,600 years ago, God said, I will scatter you, speaking specifically of the Jewish people, to the nations of the earth, but then I will bring you back, and even specifically mentions different countries that he's going to bring them back from. That's stunning.
It is, and no other people group throughout the world, whether in ancient history, whether it be the Chinese or the Persians or the Greeks, no one has anything of any ancient prophecies foretelling what will happen. And throughout the scriptures, we have this really history foretold ahead of time of what God said, that when the people are removed, that the land will lay desolate until the people return, and then he begins describing what will happen, and we're beginning to see some of that right now.
That's so specific. The
Very
land
specific.
will remain desolate, a marriage, that the land's alive,
Yes.
but without the right people the land lays desolate, but when the right people come back, the land actually opens up.
And you bring up a great point, because the land was, for the time that the Jewish people were out of the land, had been conquered and reconquered multiple times. It never becomes a homeland for any other people group, and the land itself wouldn't produce for anyone else until 1948, and literally the deserts really began to blossom, and streams are literally being found in the desert. And so a lot of these prophetic words that are throughout the scriptures that for centuries we would read as allegorical or spiritual or just symbolic, they're literal. And if the nation of Israel has shown us anything in the last 70 years, is that God means exactly what he says, and he spelled it out very clearly from the beginning.
Amen to that, yeah. Just to give people an idea of how literal. So one of the prophecies, and we'll put it up on the screen, is the desert shall blossom like a rose.
Yes.
Literally, the desert shall blossom like a rose. Interesting fact that Israel is the leading exporter of roses to Europe.
That's right.
During the winter months, the leading exporter in the world of roses. Is that a coincidence?
Yeah, not at all. And it's the same thing with Isaiah 27. It talks about, in that day Jacob will take root and will fill the earth with fruit. It's literally happening. And so much of the vegetables and flowers and the fruit production is happening in the Negev desert. It's literally producing exactly what Isaiah said.
The thing that's so profound in the book is taking photographs from the 19th century and early 20th century and showing how barren the land is, and then shooting the same exact spot from the same exact angle in 70 years later or 100 years later or 50 years later.
Yeah.
In the case of Jerusalem, that's what he's done in the book, and it's stunning. So how did you, tell me about that. That's an amazing idea.
Yeah, it was really, for me, it was a bit of an adventure. It was like X marks the spot. I mean, every day you were waking up. The photo shoot was about 5 or 6 weeks. I used a phenomenal photographer, Elise Theriot. She's out of California, that just has a really a sharp view of what I was trying to recreate. And so much has changed, both with the landscape and the cities and even just the old walls of the city, that I thought, for people that have never been to Israel or may never have a chance to, it's more than just simply documenting what's been happening, but to be able to wrap it all into the fact that the Bible's being fulfilled in our day, and here's some visual evidence that that's true.
Doug, give me a couple of examples of the experience when you were actually looking at the ancient photograph, what it's become today as this process was, as you were undertaking this project.
Yeah, I mean, in the book there's over 25 locations with over 100 photo comparisons, and so some of the sites we would go to in a way it was almost a little frustrating, because I know I would be standing on the exact spot, but I couldn't get the landscape of the old photos because of how much had grown up, and because of the buildings, and because it just so much had grown. But oftentimes, if I was in a place where I didn't know, I would go into a market and try to find an older gentleman that's most likely lived there, and I did that in Jericho. So down in Jericho, I go in, and I have this photo, it's in the book, and I even write a little bit of a story in there about that, about going in, having a photo from the late 1800s. The Jericho plain, the Jordan Valley in the background is completely empty, and there's just this little stone arch that looks like ruins at the time from the 1890s, and I'm thinking, what are the chances that I'm going to find this? And so I go into a market and I find an older gentleman, 60s, 70s, that had grown up there, and I'm showing him on my laptop, and I said, do you have any idea where this is at? And he kind of laughed, and he says, that's the old sugar mill. Let me take you right to it. And so he took me right to it, and I had coffee, sat down, spent some time with him. But there were so many of these sort of day-to-day experiences where I had no idea where to go. I bump into the right person who says,
yes.
I'll take you right to it. And so
it's called a God incident, my
Indeed.
friend, a God
Indeed.
incident. I want to talk about some specific prophecies that you mentioned in the book, like Ezekiel 36.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Mark Twain's experience, what he wrote in the 1860s.
Yes.
The first photograph of Jerusalem, 1844, back when photography was brand new. I want you to get this book. It's really, really profound. If you love Israel, you will connect with this book. You'll learn a whole lot more than you know now. It's absolutely amazing. We have some other materials we want to get into your hands as well. Here's how.
Do you need encouragement that God can transform you? Israel Rising by Doug Hershey will show you how God is fulfilling His promises to Israel and how He will fulfill them for you. This stunning photo book shows God's blessing on Israel that changed it from a desert wasteland to a rich, abundant oasis in the Middle East. Order Israel Rising by Doug Hershey now, and we'll sow a special gift into your life, the Miracle of Israel DVD. This award-winning documentary film shows how God is fulfilling Old Testament prophecies one by one before our very eyes. Both are yours for a one-time gift of $40 or more. Or you can become a new monthly partner for $30 a month or more. And we'll add a Rabbi Looks at Israel, a DVD that follows Rabbi Jonathan Bernis to locations in Israel that will ultimately be the sites where biblical prophecy is fulfilled. We'll also add this stunning Names of God plaque. Meditate on 23 different biblical references for God. This plaque comes ready to hang up and looks great in your home or office. When you become a new monthly partner for $30 a month or more, you bring the gospel and vital medical care to one person each month. That's 12 people each year. Specify offer $41.54 to receive all of these gifts with your new monthly partnership of $30 or more. Specify offer 2026 when giving a one-time gift of $40 or more. You can also go to our website, jewishvoice.tv, with your gift of support, or send it to us at Jewish Voice, Post Office Box 6, Phoenix, Arizona 85001.
The city of David one is stunning.
Oh, I know.
It really is. Welcome back. We're looking at fascinating photos that show God's hand on Israel over the last 100 years. These are incredible comparisons. We're just looking at the city of David, completely barren and now completely built up. And Tel Aviv is absolutely profound. 1940, between 1940 and 1946, nothing.
Yeah, and that old photo from the 1946, if you look closely, there's you can see camel caravans on the beach bringing supplies into Tel Aviv.
Desolate.
Completely.
Desolate. Talk about Israel pre-1948, the 19th century into the early 20th century. I know there were pioneers.
For sure.
The big fight over this land, very abundant land, filled with agriculture, not the case 100 years ago, right?
Not the case for 500 years ago. I mean, going all the way back. And in the book, I have quotes from Christians, Muslims, and Jews from almost every century for the last 2,000 years describing what the land looked like. And everyone talks about it being desolate and being empty, or ancient terraces for farming being completely destroyed or forgotten. Most historians agree that in the under the Ottoman Empire from 1517 to 1917, the land suffers more than any other time in history, and that's partially because the Ottomans had this brilliant taxation policy of the land, is that they would tax the people based on the amount of trees that you have. So if you don't want to pay taxes, what do? I mean, you cut down the tree, and it completely decimates the entire region. Topsoil is blown away, animal populations disappear, weather patterns change, and the entire land just completely suffers up until the really the late 1800s, with Jewish immigration returning back. The JNF, the Jewish National Fund, records in the last 100 years that they've planted over 250 million trees in the land. Wow. Which is staggering.
And I know that some of you watching have planted trees through the JNF. Keep doing it. It's really important.
And it's really a prophetic act as well, because it's not just simply planting a tree in Israel, because when you go back to Ezekiel 36, that is the very first thing that Ezekiel mentions. In Ezekiel 36, he's talking to the land and he says, you'll put forth branches and produce fruit. It's the very first thing. And so here we see the formation and the transformation of the land, beginning with trees putting forth branches, and as entire forests have been replanted, and all of them by hand. Topsoil is recreated, weather patterns are literally changing over the region, more rainfall, more dew, and everything just begins to physically change.
I want to come back to that, because that's a prophecy I want to focus on. But you actually quote some of what Mark Twain said about Israel when he toured the land in the 1860s. Just give us a summary.
1867, he comes through the land, and by all accounts from his writings, he was quite disappointed. He writes things about being going through certain valleys and saying you could travel 10 miles in any direction and not see another human being. He'd said at one point of his journey, it looked like that there were some sheep on the other hillside eating rocks. And he says, I can't imagine that they're eating rocks, but there's nothing else for them to eat. And then even getting into Jerusalem in 1867, he writes, he says, I don't know how to communicate how small Jerusalem is. He said a fast walker could walk around the city in about an hour.
So it's tiny, it's undeveloped, it's desolate.
Completely
it's
empty.
a swamp, malaria-infested swamp in some areas.
That's right.
In other areas, it's just desert. It's just barren
That's
wilderness.
right.
That's the condition of Israel before the Jewish people returned.
That's right.
Documented.
Also in the book, going back to the Ottomans, they were so kind to do a census that in 1844 that's also in the book, and it says that the population of Jerusalem is only 15,000 and the majority of the population is Jewish. In 1844.
Hold. This is not anything related to Christian propaganda, to Jewish propaganda.
Not at all.
A census in
A census,
1844
correct.
shows us historically that Jerusalem, with only 15,000, is mostly Jewish inhabitants.
And that's coming from
From
Ottoman Turks. It's coming from Ottoman Turks who are Muslim. And so also in the book, and is dating back to the 10th century, one of my favorite quotes in the book is also coming from a Muslim writer. And he's lamenting about how that there's very few worshipers in the mosque, and Jerusalem is primarily made up of Jews.
That's the real picture, by the way. That's the real history. Okay, let's focus on a specific prophecy that you
Yes.
talk about in the book, that you lay out in the book. Ezekiel 36. And it goes into Ezekiel 36, 37.
Sure.
Lay that out for us. That's an amazing prophecy that I want to focus on for a few minutes.
Yeah, Ezekiel 36 is just, it's really a unique passage because God is speaking to the land, the physical land of Israel, which oftentimes we think of prophecy being spoken to kings or to nations or to people. But God is speaking specifically to the land and tells Ezekiel, I want you to prophesy to the mountains, to the rivers, to the hills, and to the valleys. And this is what I want you to say to the land. And so for the first, I think it's 12 or 13 verses, when he's saying, and I will do this for you, he's saying he's talking to a physical piece of land, not just a piece of land as far as real estate, but almost is talking to it as if it's an active living component.
That is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's reactivated between
Yes.
a land promised to a people
Yes.
and a people that are promised a land for eternity, but then banished from that land and wandering.
And if you kind of take that image and turn it into sort of a triangle or even a trinity of sorts, if you have God and the land and the people, anytime you would remove one of those components, everything fell apart. And so when the people would forget God, they would overwork the land. And not give it the Sabbath rest like the Torah commanded. And so then the people are thrown out of the land. And when the people are out of the land lays desolate. And what do the people do when they're out of the land? They say, God, return us to the land next year in Jerusalem. And so then when the people return, the land physically responds. And part of Ezekiel 36 says, I'm going to gather them all back, and then I'm going to pour out a cleansing. And then there's going to be a sprinkling. And so we're in the beginning of seeing those things
It's
unfold.
an incredible symbiotic relationship
It
between
really
a
is.
people and a land that God has declared are to be married together.
Yes.
And then it says, when I bring you back to the land, I'll also pour out my Spirit on you. You'll
Yes.
live again physically, but I'll also breathe life into you. So
Yes.
it's the promise of a spiritual revival. It's talking about the blindness coming off of the eyes of the Jewish people.
And the verses that are in there, they're common, that everyone is familiar with, is I'll remove a stony heart and give you a heart of flesh, and I'll take out your spirit and I'll put in my spirit. All of those are in the context of the people being back in the land. And then he goes one step farther and he says, I'm going to change this land. Nations will pass by, and I'm going to make, the nations around will recognize that I've made this like the Garden of Eden, so that all people will know that I am the Lord. Now, as you well know, the Garden of Eden wasn't just simply a pretty place. It was a place where God intended to live with man. Yeah. And so the fact that he's beginning to change the land in itself is a prophecy of saying, I'm coming back to the land to live with my people as I intended.
He is coming back, and he's not coming back to New York or Rome. He's coming back to Jerusalem. We are witnessing Bible prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes. This is such a unique resource. It will really open your eyes to the fact that God is fulfilling His word. It's a 70th anniversary special. Happy birthday, Israel. I want to get this into your hands with some other great materials. It really is remarkable, and here's how to get it.
Do you need encouragement that God can transform you? Israel Rising by Doug Hershey will show you how God is fulfilling His promises to Israel and how He will fulfill them for you. This stunning photo book shows God's blessing on Israel that changed it from a desert wasteland to a rich, abundant oasis in the Middle East. Order Israel Rising by Doug Hershey now, and we'll sow a special gift into your life, the Miracle of Israel DVD. This award-winning documentary film shows how God is fulfilling Old Testament prophecies one by one before our very eyes. Both are yours for a one-time gift of $40 or more. Or you can become a new monthly partner for $30 a month or more. And we'll add a Rabbi Looks at Israel, a DVD that follows Rabbi Jonathan Bernis to locations in Israel that will ultimately be the sites where biblical prophecy is fulfilled. We'll also add this stunning Names of God plaque. Meditate on 23 different biblical references for God. This plaque comes ready to hang up and looks great in your home or office. When you become a new monthly partner for $30 a month or more, you bring the gospel and vital medical care to one person each month. That's 12 people each year. Specify offer $41.54 to receive all of these gifts with your new monthly partnership of $30 or more. Specify offer 2026 when giving a one-time gift of $40 or more. You can also go to our website, jewishvoice.tv, with your gift of support, or send it to us at Jewish Voice, Post Office Box 6, Phoenix, Arizona 85001.
Welcome back. My guest is Doug Hershey. What an amazing book, and what a great way to celebrate Israel's 70th anniversary. You made a comment to me, Doug, earlier that I just want you to expound on. You said Israel's the only place where the desert is actually contracting.
Yes.
As opposed to expanding.
Yeah,
unpack that one.
Yeah, of all the nations on the earth, Israel's the only place, again, where they're shrinking and not expanding. All the deserts everywhere else are expanding. And part of that comes down to water. Right now, Israel has 4 desalinization plants, 3 that are along the Mediterranean, 1 down at the Red Sea, that will take seawater and their system, and in about 45 minutes come out with fresh drinking water. And so right now, Israel is producing over 40% of its water demands at these desalinization plants. From that point, the wastewater that Israel produces, over 90%, almost 90%, is going to a place that will then sort of reconstitute the water and send that back into agricultural purposes at water reclamation plants. And so Israel is far and away the leader as far as desalinization, water reclamation, and desert farming. And as a result, everything is growing.
It's just stunning. It's absolutely stunning that Israel's not just survived.
Yes.
Israel is prospering.
And again, if we point back to Ezekiel 36, it's something that it says in Ezekiel 36 as well. It says, speaking to the land, God says that you will no longer bear the reproach of famine among the nations. And so quite literally, right now, they're estimating that by 2050, that almost 70% of the water demands for Israel will come from these desalinization plants coming out of the sea. And so quite literally, what we're going to see in a very short amount of time is Israel will most likely become the first drought-proof nation ever. So that if it never rains in Israel again, they're pulling water out of the sea, they're using the wastewater for agriculture.
And that was their #1 threat some years ago.
That's
their
right.
#1 threat.
You know, when I first started going 20 years ago, everyone was concerned about the next war being over water, and now Israel's becoming water independent.
God said it, I will bless you, and I will make you a blessing to the nations. I'll bless those who bless you.
Yes.
And curse the one who curses you. The contrast between the before and after, 1933, 2016, it's just radical.
Yes.
It's radical.
It's stunning.
What's your favorite picture in this?
Oh man, I have so many. But there's probably the one of Tel Aviv on the back is just simply stunning. Tel Aviv, 1909, the city begins. This one's taken in the 1940s, but Why that's significant to me is every major piece of technology that we're using right now, whether it be cell phones or computer components or the flash drives to move information or voicemail or instant messenger, whatever, pick a technology, it was all designed in that city, which really literally didn't exist before 1909.
It's just an amazing contrast. What do you hope people get out of this book? Last question.
Yeah, two things. One is that God is faithful. It's unfolding exactly as he said, and probably it's one of the most unique times to be alive in history. Here we have God after 2,600 years doing things exactly as he said. It's not allegorical, it's not symbolic, it's not so much of a spiritual application. He's literally causing the deserts to bloom. He's literally saying to the land, you'll be cultivated and sown. It is. He says all of these waste and forgotten cities, you'll be rebuilt. It is. It's happening exactly as he said. And so we're seeing the Bible not just something to read anymore and to pull spiritual significance, but it's tangibly happening in front of us, and the book is providing photographic evidence to that.
Doug, well done. Well done. It's a
Thank you.
great resource. And it makes me think of this statement, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
Yes.
God declared it. God's fulfilling his word. He wants you to live. He wants you to have life, and he wants you to have it abundantly. Listen, we're here because we care about you. God loves you, we love you, and we're here. If you have any questions, if you have prayer needs, remember that's why Jewish Voice exists. You can log on to our website. It's jewishvoice.tv. Hey, I hope you have a good church or congregation you go to, but I want to be your rabbi by television because I really do care about you. We pray for every need that comes in to this ministry. So just know God loves you, and so do we. I want to thank Doug Hershey for joining us today, and as I close the program, I want to remind you, as I always do, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Psalm 122:6 says, to pray and you will prosper. Well, until next time, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Bernis saying shalom and God bless you.
Don't miss the Jewish Voice 2019 Israel Tour. You'll walk the ancient streets where Yeshua walked. You'll learn from Jonathan Bernis as he shares teachings at historic sites like the Old City of Jerusalem and other inspiring locations throughout Israel. You'll also enjoy your choice of 4- or 5-star accommodations, make new friends, savor some of Israel's most delectable foods, and experience memorable adventures, such as being baptized in the River Jordan or renewing your wedding vows aboard a boat on the Sea of Galilee. Here's a special message from Jonathan.
I want to personally invite you to join me and my family in Israel. It will change your life and you will never read the Bible the same again.
For more information, call 800-299-9374 or go to jewishvoice.tv/Israel. Again, 800-299-9374 or jewishvoice.tv/Israel.